Hello. Today I'm gonna try to be a little bit quicker than last time. We're gonna try to do just a basic stagger effect. Now I'm gonna just plop a geometry node. The thing about stagger is it's not as easy in Houdini, but it's definitely doable without doing a lot of custom stuff. So I'm gonna put a pig head down, and I'm just gonna try to see if I can tween some animations on it, but also then use that animation to stagger. So let's say I've got like 5 of these pig heads, and I'm gonna try to make them like animate one after another. So, okay, well, the fun part is here. So I'm gonna put a transform down and actually animate. Let's put this panel top to bottom, and then in the inspectors go into animation editor, and I'm gonna give it a basic animation. So let me key the Y value using command or alt click frame 0. I'm gonna reduce the length of this animation 64. So frame 0, let's see, and maybe here I'll put like a 2. Okay, so I'm gonna press the home button, so I got an animation. Houdini sometimes doesn't refresh itself, so I'm gonna go into well, in my case, I've got Houdini Labs where I can reset the viewport. Somewhere in the default settings, there's also a reset viewport. I don't remember where, but for now, I'm gonna hit reset viewport just so that it actually shows me the animation. This could just be my build, so I'm not sure if it's fixed on someone else's build. But anyway, I'm just gonna make a basic animation, and I'm gonna command click here so I can add some elasticity. If you control click on a key, you can shift it left and right. So I'm gonna make it go up a lot, make it go down a little bit, make it go up a little bit. Let's see how that looks. Oh, let me disable real time. Let me mess around. Another thing is if you shift and select on the timeline, you can grab a key, and then if you middle click, you can rearrange the key. So instead of messing around here, you can just select here and then middle click. You don't even need to shift, like you can directly middle click, but if you wanted to have multiple keys, I just feel like shift just is the only shortcut I use. So I don't know, depends on what you prefer. Either way, okay. All right, we got basic animation. Let me actually label this basic animation. All right. So if you want to offset this, so like let's say you wanted to not start at 0, you could click on here and start shifting these things around. But that's not gonna work if I want to stagger something. It would, but you need to manually do it, which is a pain. So I'm gonna put a time shift down. And by the way, if you tab and then you go time shift and you press enter, it's gonna put somewhere in the file. But if you tab time shift and then shift and enter, it's gonna directly link it to the previous node. So that's what I'm doing. So this is not gonna do anything now because it's default. If I click on frame, it's defaulting to the current frame. So basically time shift can offset frames. So if I go frame plus 5, instead of starting at frame 1, it's going to start at frame 6. So it's already at frame 6 from the get-go. So if I go, -5, it actually has a 5-second delay, which is cool. But it's now the more difficult part is getting that to actually be a linked dynamic variable. All right, so to make that number 5 be a more interactive variable so you can actually work with it better, you can link it using attributes. So I'm going to make a new tab and I'm going to go inspector, geometry, just to visualize. And there's two ways of making an attribute. One is with the wrangle. And I can say like I add start frame. Oops, equals like 10, which would make a start frame of 10. So basically what this does is every single point in this geometry now has an integer with the name start frame on it at 10 is the value. Now I don't need every single thing on this geo to be 10, so I can do a couple things. I can, instead of selecting the points of it, I can work on the detail, because the detail, for example, only does one go. So if I select detail, it's only gonna have the variable once. So for this whole object, it's only gonna have a single detail variable, which is really good for performance if you're gonna work on more complicated things. So you don't need to loop through all these things. Anyway, so yeah, you can use an Arango, or if you don't want to code, which is unavoidable at some point, but if you don't want to code, you can go attribute create, and then you put that down, and then you can call it, oops, you can go, yeah, I was looking at some videos. You can go start frame. I'm just gonna try keep the naming the exact same. And I'm gonna pick 10 here. Oops, sorry. So I'm just gonna select the value here at 10. So if I go here, the start frame is now at 10, which is cool. Oh yeah, it's a point. So if I go here and go detail, it's 10. It's also an integer, so that's 10. So the point is, you can either select start frame 10 with this wrangle, or you can do it with this node. The value slider here is your default, so, or like it's your starting values. So because of the fact, I'm gonna go back to 0, that it lets you do 4. It's kind of a neat in this case. So typically, if you were to do a vector, for example, this would be x, y, z. But because it's just an integer, you just need x, or the default, which is 10. So I'm not going to use it, but it's good to know. So I'm just going to use the Wrangle version. Declare start frame. And here, instead of saying -5, I can go negative. It's a detail. So I'm going to type in detail, open bracket, and then 0, comma, and then the name of the variable, start frame. And then as a default number, I'm going to select 0. So now, oops. Let me just make, oh, sorry. I'm going to go plus instead of negative. Oh, nope, okay. I really should double check to make sure. I feel like something's off. So frame, which is 1 minus detail minus 10. Ah, okay. So if it's plus detail. Oh, I didn't actually select this, so let me select it in the first place. So frame minus detail. All right, there we go. So 1 minus 10 should be -9. All right, it is. So now there's a 9-second delay. Now, if you're wondering what this chunk of code is, I can explain it which I'm trying to, but it's not as easy because it's got a lot of sub options. You can click on the question mark instead and type in detail. The short of it is you're sampling the same way you'd sample in Photoshop a color value. So you're sampling the detail. Let me just go back here. So you're sampling the detail variable, which we made here, at geometry, which is 0. So when you see this line between these two nodes, that's the chain of paths. So for example here, this is the line 0, this is the line 1, this is the line 2, the line 3. So that's 0 here because it's the first one and the only one. The attribute name we've made. Ignored, I'm not sure what that is. 99% of the time I just type in 0 at the end because it typically is the default. So basically if Houdini can't even find what you're looking for, or if there's some kind of issue, it's good to have a default number. So in this case it's 0, which shouldn't make any difference, but it's just good to have a backup. So that's what detail does. Yeah, so now you've got a sample. All right, so now it moves. That's great. Now this is the more easy part, but we gotta go into the more complicated part. How are we gonna actually stagger? So, in order to stagger, well, let's make some points or something first. So I'm gonna make a grid, and I'm gonna put in the XY plane. I don't need this many. You can instead of using polygon, you can select points, which will make you a bunch of points. So I'm gonna display the points. These seem kind of small, so I'm gonna press D and then go into, which one was it? I swear it was one of these. Oh yeah, I think it's point marker size under guide. So I'm gonna press 8 on that, and now they're gonna be nice and big. So let's say I want to get 5 points in a row. I think it's, let's go with 1, column 5. All right, now I got 5 points. So if I go into points mode, I can see I got 5 points. Now if I copy this animation, they're all gonna animate, so that's cool. So there's several ways of doing it, and what I'm doing is just one. So I'm sure there's much easier ways or much more complicated ways. But I like to have some control, so I don't want it to just stagger. I want it to stagger in a way in the path I want it to stagger. So for example, maybe I want to like have an object move through them, or have some kind of activator that goes one through the other and then they animate. So for example, if I want to have a sphere, okay, sphere, and I'm gonna take these points off, and then I want to transform it, and I'm gonna click on the pink rectangle just so I have these as guides. I can barely see them, but I can kind of see them. So if I go here, like, and I want it to go from -2, -3, and then I want it to go to +3. Okay, so now it's moving left to right. Oh, that's not enough. Let's make it more than that. There we go. Okay. Let's make it -4, -6. This is difficult because these points are quite small. You know what? I'm just gonna make them not so small. So I'm gonna use a, let's see, what was the node? Copy to points, which should take a geometry. So I'm gonna use a sphere. And I'm gonna, and the points to copy to. So now there is a sphere being copied on top of these points. So now at least I can actually see what I'm doing. So I'm gonna select this instead. All right, so it's going through all of them. So like, let's say I want to activate them using this circle. All right, so in order to do that, I'm gonna need to use some code and a solver. So for example, you could You could use a time shift, but the problem with the time shift is it's using H script and not Vex. So there's a lot of functions you just don't have access to. So instead of finding a hacky approach, I'm gonna try to use just Vex and a tiny bit of H script. So I'm gonna make a solver just so I have it in the sidelines. We'll go in a second, but I do want to just have it there. And I'm gonna put attribute wrangle. Now, what I've got here is 5 points, and I want to activate them as this circle is going through them. So if I go in my geometry spreadsheet, I can have a variable called, let's make it a string. So string hit equals hit. Makes sense? Sure. And then s at hit equals hit. Very good code. 10 out of 10. Now I'm gonna try to figure out if I can make this kick in when the circle is actually over top them. If it's not, then it won't kick in. But if it is, then it will. So I've got the grid connected to the first node of this wrangle. I'm gonna put the transform on the second input. So they're coming in, you know, one by one. And I'm gonna start doing some math, but not much, just a little bit. So I'm gonna try to get where the sphere is. And in order to do that, I'm gonna make a vector, and I'm gonna call it guide position equals point, which is like we talked about before. You basically are sampling from a different object, so I'm gonna sample the point of the sphere, open bracket, and because this is 0, this line is 0, this one is 1, so I'm gonna select 1, comma, open bracket P, close bracket for position, and 0 as your default. Again, it doesn't, the last part doesn't really do much, but you do it anyway, just cause. So now I can actually get the position of the sphere, which you can, you know, test here by going v at guide at guide position equals guide position. So now I can actually see as I'm scrubbing the position of the guide. Now this is actually, because I'm using point, it's actually selecting only one point from the sphere, and the sphere has many points. So if I tab here and tap in pack, I can just reduce all these points into a single point, which you can see here. So if I go into pack, you can see all these points here. And if I pack it once, it's now just a single one, which is right at the center of the sphere, just to make things simpler. So now when this thing is getting the point value, it's only getting that middle point. Okay, so now I got the guide position, and I've got your own position, because, you know, at P is your position of that point. So I'm gonna get the distance between those two. So if I go float distance, I'm gonna call it this just so that it doesn't actually interfere with the default namings, equals distance, which is a built-in function. So this will get the distance between two vectors. So if I type in at P and then guide position, and then I just test it just to see what happens. So f at dist equals dist. You can see the distance gets smaller and then bigger. So for example here, this is the very first one, so the one on the left. So if right now it's just getting smaller and smaller, and then it's getting bigger and bigger. So now I know how far away the circle is from all these points, which is great. So I can say here, I'm gonna delete all this other stuff. So I can say if distance is smaller than, I'm gonna need to put some kind of arbitrary number. So I'm gonna go channel float minimum distance, and then something will happen here. Not sure what yet. So if I click on these little spare parameters, I can make a little minimum distance variable. So I'm trying to say here, if the ball is closer than the minimum distance, do something such as mark it as being ready to be animated or something. So here I can go, let's say as at hit, so update the variable hit and call it hit. So there we go. So now you can already see it here. So if I go hit, see that? It just hit the first one, hit the second one, the last one, this fourth one, and the fifth one. So yeah, so basically it's getting closer, and then this activates, and then the second one, and then the next one, the next one. Now, something about distance is sometimes you're gonna have a negative distance, and sometimes you're gonna have positive distance because the circle could be coming from the left and the right. It's not here; it's just coming from the left. But just so that we eliminate that possibility of having an error if you're aiming from right to left, I'm gonna go abs brackets dist. This basically says take whatever you've got, like any of these numbers, and make sure they're not negative. So if it's like -1, now it's 1. If it's -0.5, now it's 0.5. This is just a failsafe, really. So doesn't make any difference here, but I'm gonna put it in there anyway. All right, so now you can see it is working, but it doesn't actually stay hit. It needs to it goes away after a while because obviously the distance gets bigger again. And this is where it starts to get more frustrating because you by default you can't just have you can't have the information in the previous frame, right? You're working one frame at a time, which is why the solver is actually useful. So I'm gonna take this entire thing, cut it, and put it in the solver, and put it in between this previous frame and out. Now, with the solver, let's get it actually right in the first place. So you connect the grid, the first one, the transform, the second one, and then this is important. Make sure you select it with a blue mark. Then you pin the screen, and you also pin the geometry spreadsheet. So make sure they're both pinned. Go back to the first frame, and all right, great. So now that they're both pinned, let's go in it. So as you're scrubbing, oh, let me actually put this on the out. Oh, did this break again? Let me go labs reset. No, it didn't. That's interesting. Okay, what did I make a mistake on? Let me just make sure that that's not okay. Yeah, all right. I did make a mistake somewhere. Oh, right. Okay. So in the main level, you'll see that the grid's connected to the first one and the transformer is the second one. But over here, there's only one input. So these are the same things as the parent levels for nodes, like these 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to connect the second one to the second connection here so that it actually links to the ball. So it's going to hit, 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 hit. Great. So now it stays. That's awesome. So because this does actually have access to the previous frame, so it doesn't get reset every single frame. And once it is hit, I'm going to just say integer I at the frame it got hit on. So frame hit equals at frame. And let's see what happens there. It's 0, 0, 0. And it's updating. So you can see which frames it's hit on. Now you see that it actually updates, so because there's multiple frames where this was hit on, which makes it more difficult because it's going to keep resetting itself because that ball is nearby several frames. So I'm going to do another failsafe. So I'm going to say if s string at hit is not hit, does not have an actual value yet, aka if this hasn't happened yet, if this hasn't actually been created yet, then do what we're doing. So it doesn't actually repeat itself. It only updates if this was never made in the first place. So let's see if that makes a difference. Okay, so 10, 17, 23, 29. Okay. Yeah. All right, good. So that actually updates. So now we know which frames to update this on. Cool. So now we can use this integer as a way to work with the time shift. Although by default it's going to be at 0, which is not good because if it's, for example, frame plus 0, they're going to animate immediately. So just to put another failsafe in, I'm going to say make the default, so else, basically the default of this frame head. I add frame head equals, make it 999 or something crazy. This way, this is not going to actually animate if it's not ready yet. So that this way the time shift is going to go start the animation at frame plus 999. So it's going to start the animation at frame 1000, which we're not even close to. So it's not even going to animate until it's ready. So 10, 17. All right, great. So that's animated. Well, that's set up in the first place. Go. So, all right, so that's solved. Now, if you were to just put the basic animation here at the bottom, it's going to try to animate everything at once. And then if you were to put the time shift here, it's going to try to work with everything at once. So, which we don't want. So I'm going to use a for each loop. So I'm going to go type for each point, because it's literally for each point, which will make a for loop, which if I go into the end here and go single pass, it's going to go through all of them, except it's not. Let's see. All right, because it's merging them. Okay, it is going through every single point, but it merges them at the end. So, you know what? Let's just, hope for the best. So, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So the point here is I'm trying to go through all of these points, and then I'm going to try to use time shift on all these points one at a time, and I'm going to try to offset it using the frame head. So I'm going to put the basic animation here. I'm going to put the time shift here. And then I'm going to try to do the same thing I did before over here. In fact, I'm just going to copy it. Add frame negative detail. So I'm going to add frame negative detail. Now it's not a detail, it's a point value. You can see that here. So I'm going to go negative point. And it's called frame hit, not start frame. So, and it's 0.0 because it's going through all of them. So it should theoretically go through the first point and call it 0, then go to the second point, but it's only, going one at a time. So that's still going to be 0, etc. Let's see if that actually did anything. No. Okay. All right. My for loop is messed up. So I'm just going to first reset the viewport. Cool. And then I'm going to do a single pass so I can make sure that these are actually... There we go. Okay, so it's just a cache issue. All right, so one at a time. So it first goes through 0.0 and does a basic animation and then offsets that basic animation using frame hit. So let's see what that looks like. 0. Oh, it's not doing anything. Let's find out. Okay, did I call it something bad? Let's see. Frame hit. Oh, I need a second 0. Oh, yeah. Okay, so. Yeah, okay. I need a second 0. So if I go back to the docs, and I go into point. I know, but like, why do I need a second 0? Because the H script is funny. Okay, yeah, that's why. So the first 0 is saying get the line up here. The second 0 is saying get the point number. There's only one point number, which is 0. So that's what I forgot here. Then the next one is get the attribute, which is frame hit, and then the X index at 0. All right, so it is getting it. So like, for example, if I had like 0, 1, it would get the second point. But yeah, so now it's animating this. Yeah, so as soon as the hit occurs, let me just show you what it looks like. So 9999, and then once, and then it starts. And I'm gonna stop the single pass so I can test all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah. Now that's staggered it. I did have to use a .NET solver. There's a much like less .NET way of doing things, but it's more code based, and I don't want to go into that because it's gonna take me an hour. I can if it's useful to anyone, because you don't need to use a .NET, but it's not as easy. So hopefully that helps someone. If you can copy the points from here, and yeah, so that you can do that. If you want to go even further, you can, instead of using copy pasting stuff, you can right click on the animation and go actions, make a reference copy. So this way you don't actually need to, you can work off here, like you can animate here, and then any change you make here, this copy already animates, like updates the change, so you can just work in a single place. Yeah, so hopefully that was useful, and yeah, thanks everyone. Bye.